Our top story tonight. The country remains on the verge of a record harvest, and yet for a third consecutive year, there is simply no space for storing the grain. We at CNN have been highlighting this national shame for 2 years now. We did a ground check yet again and have found that food grain procured for the country's 1.2 billion people is feeding worms in several states. In Haryana, for example, 3,500 metric tons of food grain is rotting. Worse, this rotting grain has actually been passed on to the poor through the PDS. Rupashree Nanda reports on India's crying shame.
CNN brought you this story last August.
There is no kind of waste which is not in evidence over here.
We decided on a ground check this May. Food grain procured and stored for the country's 1.2 billion people is now feeding worms. This once used to be wheat. Shift the layer of what looks like grain and discover the grain dust. Rotting gunny sacks that can't hold the grain anymore. Wooden platforms on which stacks must rest, giving away. 35,000 metric tons of food grain procured by Haryana Food and Civil Supplies Department and state agencies allowed to rot. 4 officers have been suspended, but there's no stemming the rot. Worse, some of this rotting grain has actually been passed on to the poor through the PDS.
डिपो में ये पब्लिक के लिए जाता है जी, कोटान पे बटता है, गरीब लोगों को बटता है, सड़ता हुआ ये सब जाता है जी, सब मिला के दे रहे हैं.
Officials don't deny the rot, nor the fact that some of this grain could have reached the public.
PDS के जो थे परमिट, वो पहले खाद्य आपूर्ति विभाग द्वारा बनाए जाते थे. वो इस जो करंट महीना है, मई का जो रिलीज ऑर्डर है, वो भारतीय खाद्य निगम ने समय बनाए हैं.
This field at Baghola stores 6 lakh sacks of wheat, each weighing 50 kilos. 8,000 sacks are already rotting.
सरकार ने क्या दे रखा फैसिलिटी इसके लिए? कोई सरकार ने दी है हिदायत की? कितनी बार इसकी चिट्ठी लिखी हमने, कोई सुनाई की आज तक?
95,000 metric tons of grain in Haryana is at least 3 years old. With very little covered space available, fields across the Mathura-Agra highway are now being used to store the fresh grain.
Last monsoons, we had reported a shocking story of neglect and decay from this very location. A year later, the condition over here has only worsened. In fact, this storage yard violates every norm of food storage and distribution. Every grain over here tells you the story of a rot. The question is, who is responsible for this? And what will the condition be when the monsoons come? With camera person Ravinder, in Dioli, Rupashree Nanda.